Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Eileen Jeng Lynch, Curator of Visual Arts at Wave Hill, and we're thrilled to have Alexis Rockman joining us today. We're streaming on Facebook Live for those watching on Wave Hill's website. Alexis and I will be speaking for about 20 to 25 minutes. You can ask questions in the comment section on Facebook, and we'll answer them at the end of our conversation. So with a career spanning over 3 decades, Rockman is known for his large-scale paintings and works on paper, focusing on human and natural histories, often depicting dystopic views of civilization's impact on natural ecosystems. His work addresses issues of climate change, globalization, colonialism, genetic engineering, among many other topics. Rockman's paintings were shown in Wave Hill's 2015 exhibition, 7 Deadly Sins, Wrath, Force of Nature, and his field drawings will be on view in the exhibition, Eco-Urgency, Artists Make the Case, next year. You'll see some of these works today. Among many solo museum exhibitions, Rockman's The Great Lakes Cycle, organized by the Grand Rapids Art Museum, will be on view at the Flint Institute of Arts starting July 11th. Rockman's work is in notable museum collections, including the Baltimore Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, Grand Rapids Art Museum, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, New Orleans Museum of Art, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, and Whitney Museum of American Art, to name a few. So thank you so much, Alexis, for being here.
Hi, Eileen, how are you?
Good. So I'm excited to discuss your field drawings made from fossils, soil, dirt, and other organic materials gathered on streets, parks, construction sites, and beaches in New York City and Long Island. These works depict the complex biodiversity of the area, some native, others invasive species that we may not even think of. The range of animals and plants is truly astonishing, spanning over 200 million years, as we can see pictured in these exhibition catalogs.
Yep. Okay.
And here we have the Parish Art Museum, Salon 94, and Site Santa Fe.
Yep.
So here we see you at Jacob Riis Beach in Queens, out in the field, so to speak. And so how did you select these particular sites and the flora and fauna selection in New York City? What are your sources of inspiration for these field drawings?
Well, the criteria was to think about it in terms of, first of all, every borough, and I ended up including the Jersey Palisades as well, particularly because of the fossil record there. I had read William Beebe's Unseen Life in New York, which is a very beautiful and lyrical book that is a celebration of the history of New York City. It was written in the 50s. It's there on the left. William Beebe's wonderful figure, if you're interested in nature or natural history. He is one of the titans of the early and mid 20th century. He was so well known that he even had a caricature in the New Yorker. So he's a real celebrity. The other inspiration was Eric Sanderson's book, Manatee, which came out, I think, about 15 years ago, which talks about the ecological history, which includes obviously geology of New York City, and sort of reconstructs its topography from a almost forensic level of detail. So when I was thinking about these 2 books, you can go back to the first slide, I thought I want to do the fossil record because as a child, since I grew up in Manhattan, my mom's an archaeologist, I always imagined dinosaurs, of course, as walking around, and luckily there were, through various geological eras. And I thought, well, how am I going to learn about where these sites might be and what's accessible? Obviously, the fossil record, you have to be very lucky to find anything in a place like Manhattan or the 5 boroughs. So I just sent an email to a friend at the Museum of Natural History named Carl Melling. I said, do you know anyone that knows about the fossil record of New York City? And he said, yeah, I'm the only one. I'm not sure if that's true, but he was incredibly generous and said, I'll pick you up in a week at 8 a.m. and I'll take you to every borough and it was really under his leadership that I went to, different parts of the city and extracted, stuff from Bruckner Boulevard, running through traffic, got a lot of tree fern in the middle of New York City where it's coming out from the right. There's a lot of like gum wrappers and glass in that drawing. And basically spent the day with him. And then over the next couple of weeks, I have another friend named Chris Bowser, who is an educator involved with Cornell, who's basically an estuary ecologist, wonderful guy. And his class went to some places that they were already going to, and they grabbed some stuff from me because they had a bit of a deadline. So it was a combination of, those books and those two wonderful naturalists that really helped me and inspired me to do this particular project.
That's great. And then speaking of Eric Sanderson's book, he states that soil, which is used, soil is crucial to all plants and all organisms that depend on plants. Soil scientists like to call soils the living skin of the earth. And so, as you mentioned, it really reflects the geological history of the island. And so we see here the glacial coverage and then also the wetlands. And it's very different from the concrete jungle that we live in today.
Yes,
and I feel like
very little of this stuff left really, but there are remnants of it.
And bring us back over 200 million years. And so I feel like you're having us travel through time in a sense. And does that stem from your interest in art, in science fiction and film, or? Well,
not really. I love science fiction. I love film, obviously, but I think that those genres are inspired by the love of imagining the past or the future for that matter. And so, is reconstructions of dinosaurs is a type of science fiction because as paleontologists know, they're often laughed at by the people that are into physics because they think it's not like hard science because they're always speculating about what these animals look like through reconstructions. I love fantasizing about, life before humans, life in the future. It's all interesting.
Yeah, and here are, speaking of dinosaurs, here are two here, the Tyrannosaur and the Orthotelestes.
Oh, no, just a minute. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. I got it wrong when we were talking. It's an ornithomimid, which is just bird-like. Yes, and you'll see that this one has feathers coming off of its forelimbs, and that's a relatively new development based on there was a revolution in the late 80s about what dinosaurs looked like. It's called the hot-blooded theory, that they're much closer to birds and have warm blood and were very active and very colorful. Which include bright feathers and all sorts of things, which to me, as you're getting old when you want your dinosaurs to be brown, like in King Kong or Jaws at night. So, but I understand that is really the prevailing belief, and I take that seriously when I'm doing a drawing or any art about it.
Right, and here, this sample was taken at the New York City Water Tunnel.
Yes, which I did not go to. That was supplied by Carl and one of his students who had been called into that water tunnel by law. They had to examine it as they were building the subway tunnel. So that's one of those things that's a lucky byproduct. He just said, "Oh, I have this Cretaceous rock that, it's a fossil of a tyrannosaur."
Well, that worked out really well.
You can have it. Getting it to pulverize to turn it into sand was a bit of a trick, but hammer and a hard surface worked out all right.
How long did that take you?
Oh, about 10 minutes of hacking, pounding it.
So just for everyone to see, we can see here on the map, the New York City Water Tunnel.
Yes,
and then,
by the way, that's only a handful of the many places that I mostly went to. I had some help, but yes.
Right, and then here are some of the other places we're going to talk about. And of course, you've been all over New York City and Long Island, but these are just a select few that we're going to discuss today.
Yeah.
And so on to the next.
Oh, and to be clear, all these drawings are made out of material that is collected from these sites. Specifically, there's nothing else in them except for some acrylic polymer to make them not fall off the paper. So for this muskrat, think about it as, it's mud from the edge of the river. It's kind of gross and probably pretty polluted.
I mean, did you see the muskrat, or how did you know it was there?
I know they're there. I have not seen a muskrat there. It's more about understanding and reading about the history of it. This could be a muskrat from 3 centuries ago. It's more about this idea of and I believe there are muskrats, and I've been on the Harlem River many times by boat. And it looks, for those of you that are lucky enough to take a boat around Manhattan, which is kind of amazing, there are parts of it that really look like there's very little disturbance, even though it's been completely reinvented by humans. It sure looks like there could be habitat for a muskrat up there.
Has the shoreline been cleaned up, do you think, over the years, or?
I mean, as you know, the Clean Water Act from the early 70s, there's probably a lot of heavy metals from, the last 2 centuries of dumping, but I think it's superficially in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
If you did, put a shovel in there, you probably dig up some mercury or something, or cadmium.
So it seems like.
How are you?
What's that?
I wouldn't be eating the muskrat myself, even though I like muskrat. No, I'm just kidding.
No, shouldn't be eating muskrats anyway. So it seems like every work tells a different story, and so I'm just going to go through a few other animals and plants. And so if you can elaborate on this manatee that was found in the water near the 59th Street Bridge. Well,
there was a wonderful moment when I was reading about the history of eco stuff in the area, that there was an account, I believe in 1985, it's been a while since I looked, that a manatee, which is one of the sirens related to the dugong. So if you go to Florida, it's the same thing. It just wandered up the East Coast, somehow got lost, and it turned around, went up the East River, went under the 59th Street Bridge, turned around and went back. So I just love this idea that this tropical animal, and this is I believe in the mid 80s, just wandered up here, and like, what the hell? It's crazy. It's kind of enchanting at the same time.
And then went back to where it
probably met its demise by some propeller somewhere, but I don't know.
Well, your paintings are very dystopic, that's for sure.
I'm a documentarian.
And is this the West Indian manatee?
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's the New World. All the New World sirens are manatees, and the Old World ones are dugongs.
Interesting. Is this particular species endangered, or I read somewhere that?
I think anything this big is endangered unless it's a deer or a wild boar. Probably not quite, but I think that they're, what's going to happen with climate change, I'm not sure. It's just I think they're freshwater and saltwater, obviously, if it's going up the East Coast, but I think it's, I wouldn't want to be a manatee.
And this next, or this plant, the Eastern poison ivy, found at Canarsie Pier?
Yeah, it's there. It's also, my wife, Dorothy Spears, suffers terribly from poison ivy. I don't believe I do. I mean, I haven't, as far as I can remember, but I always take precaution because I don't want to, she's so sensitive to it that if it's like on my skin and I touch her, it would be very unfortunate. But there's something, of course, poison ivy is this, basically poison ivy has a great ability to do toxic warfare against anything that wants to screw around with it. So it's this pretty innocuous looking thing if you don't know any better. And I love the idea that it's so dangerous.
And then this next.
Hurt anyone, but it is a dangerous thing to some people.
It is, yes.
Yes, it's loaded.
It is. Yes, it is poisonous.
Yes.
And then here, the spiny dogfish that I believe is in the shark family.
It's a shark. It's the cutest of sharks, or one of them. It's like this. It's probably the most common shark that I can think of, and they're not particularly celebrated. They're not interested in hurting people, and they are definitely found in Coney Island, along with nurse sharks. The largest nurse shark nurse like habitat is actually off the coast of Coney Island for some reason, and they happen to have them at the aquarium as well. And they're one of the few sharks that do well in captivity.
Did you see the shark?
I did not.
You haven't seen it.
It's a lot of it's wishful thinking. I know it's there somewhere, and
sure.
You know,
or it's been there and you've read, yeah.
I'm enchanted by the fantasy that it's there.
Mm-hmm. And then here, so we're going to move on to Long Island.
Yes, Mel Kendrick, the great sculptor's outdoor table, he and his wife lent Dorothy and I his house while I was doing the project for the parish, I guess almost 7 years ago. It's hard to believe, or maybe 6 years ago. And these were the first couple of ones that I did. And this is soil from Vineyard Field, I believe, behind this Fork Museum of Natural History, which was very helpful. That's in Bridgehampton. Very helpful in giving me ideas for, that computer is actually the computer that I'm doing this Zoom chat on. That's pretty funny. And that's how long I've had the computer. So I interviewed someone who was in their 80s there, and I can't remember his name, but he was very generous. And my first question is, how much has the East End changed since you were a kid? And then that got him going, like what used to live here and stuff like that.
And you can see here the paintbrushes, and you also use an eyedropper.
Yes.
But can you tell the story about how you even started these field drawings and,
yes,
and how
absolutely
things have evolved? Yeah.
I was in, during my younger phase, when I was more willing to suffer, or I was tougher or more foolish. I was camping with Mark Dion, the great sculptor and great friend, and Bob Brain, the photographer, very talented photographer, in British Guyana, ex-British Guyana, in 1994. And I, not being particularly self-aware, decided I wasn't going to work on this trip. Well, when you're in the jungle, you have a lot of downtime. And I started to kind of go crazy with nothing to do after a couple of weeks. I mean, I read, Under the Volcano or The Volcano Lover and Clockers and, A Confederacy of Dunces. And I made a series of pencil drawings of insects with a magnifying glass, and I ran out of the pencil. So I was like, what am I going to do? And Mark said, that mosquito that just bit you, why don't you do a drawing of that made out of the mud over there? And it would be a joke about earth art, Richard Long or whatever, because they would really hate the idea that you're pictorial with a strategy like that. Mm-hmm. So I thought, hey, that's funny. And, LOL. And I did it, and it actually looked kind of beautiful. And it started to look like a Joseph Beuys drawing or a Rodin drawing. And I'm like, wait, this is kind of cool. And then the drawing fell apart because I didn't have any acrylic polymer. It was just mud on paper. So I was like, all right, I'm going to grab mud on the rest of this trip in various places. And I think I know what to do. And so when I got back to my studio in New York and Tribeca, which I'm actually leaving tomorrow after 33 years, sadly, my wife and I are moving up to Connecticut to Warren for various reasons. We're at home now, but we're here for a couple of days. I made a body of work that I showed at my then gallery, J. Gorney Modern Art, in a Works on Paper show that I was doing in 1995. And, after that, I did it in Fresh Kills Landfill, La Brea Tar Pits, Tasmania, and so on and so forth. So I've done maybe 15 different versions of it, obviously New Mexico and the East End and so on. So literally anything can be used in this strategy, including wombat poop, human blood. As long as it stays on the paper, it's good.
I mean, so yeah, you've been creating these for decades. So have your tools changed? Have the field drawings changed?
Screwed up brush and, 3 viscosities of the material mixed with polymer, and that's it. It's only me and the paper in about 10 minutes.
Wow, that's fast.
If that one. Yeah, there's some of the sites.
These are only 2. I mean, you've been all over Long Island. Yeah.
Georgica Pond is, this brackish water. A friend of ours, Brian hunt, and Lucy went and live on Georgia Pond, and he said, just go down to I said, what do you see down there? He's like, raccoons and turkeys and so on. So I went through his list of things that he's seen and made films.
Here's the raccoon.
Yep. And it looks like it's made out of like schmutz.
I mean, you mentioned that Long Island is mainly sand. There's no fossil record.
So, I mean, I don't want to say that with too much authority, since I really don't know what I'm talking about, other than I don't believe so, because it was basically just pushed up by the glacier, and that's where it stopped, like a broom.
So how far back does the history go, do you know, of the land? Well,
probably about 10. How far back do my drawings go, or how far back does the history of Long Island go?
Long Island.
I would guess the end of the Ice Age, which would be 12, 15,000 years ago. Pretty young. If you're a rock.
Here we see an American oyster catcher.
Yep. And they're very common. They have a beautiful orange bill. Black and white.
And so how did you know that this species was?
I definitely saw. I mean, I've seen these a gazillion times.
You've seen it, yeah.
Dorothy and I used to go out there to Sag Harbor, and love going out there. And it was great to do the project in the parish. I'm actually working on a show right now for Guildhall for next summer about shipwreck.
Oh, great.
So a little plug for Guildhall and the parish. And
that was going to be one of my questions, but you already answered it.
Terry Sultan just left, so shout out to Terry Sultan if she's the parish, if she's listening.
And so I just want to take a look at, in contrast to your complex large-scale paintings, these field drawings have a more immediate outcome, not only because they take less time, 10 minutes, as you say, to make, or the process is unpredictable.
It doesn't take that long to make them. It takes weeks to figure it out.
Right. More, yeah. But I noticed that these are usually focused on a singular plant or animal, so you're really capturing an intimate moment. So why the more micro versus macro views in your paintings? Well,
I mean, I love the immediacy and the directness and the intimacy of drawings like this, and they don't have that mediated theatricality that my paintings tend to have, which I'm also attracted to, and it's just something I like, and I'm lucky to be able to do both. So right on.
And do both ends of the spectrum, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I love about it is, there's a high degree of failure in them, and I rip up quite a few that just don't work, and it's intuitive, and you have to, as the older I get, the less I rip up, because I have a tendency to guess what might work as a drawing. I mean, they have to sort of fix the rectangle in a certain way formally. They're very formal too.
Right. Because you consciously put the American oyster catcher further to the left, like it's not centered. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, it activating, very typical compositional ideas about, it has a place to go forward.
Here is a striped bass. Same area.
Late in the summer, migrating, spawn, if you're into fishing, which I used to be, and now I can't bear hurting anything other than Trump.
So you certainly collapsed the past and present in these field drawings. And in a way, you're leveling the field to see everything that was possible, calling attention to what has become extinct and sending a message for the future as well. So what is that message?
Message? What did Cecil B. DeMille say? If you want a message, call Western Union. I am fascinated by these ideas of, time, and I hope that is interesting to other people. That's all I can do.
Certainly. And I'm curious, how are these animals and plants used as bioindicators, which assess environmental health and biogeological changes? Of course, we've talked about this, that ties into climate change, as well as environmental and racial justice, the latter two, which you noted are entangled. What do you think can be done?
Well, I mean, some of the animals, like there's Hook Pond, which is near a golf course, are almost exclusively, and you didn't show any of those, it's a deer, two types of ticks, rabbits, and mosquitoes. Those have a bright future. Things like amphibians, which are, salamanders and frogs, do not, because they're very fragile. They get a lot of their information in terms of the ecology through their skin, and they do not welcome salt water. And as sea level rises, it's just kind of a bleak scenario for them. So it's a mixed bag, and striped bass are probably somewhere in the middle.
And what about the animals or plants that can survive in more urban areas, in the city, that are, a little bit more polluted?
Yeah, what about them?
I mean, are they showing resiliency and that they can survive in those
Yeah,
areas?
they're generalists. I mean, there's a whole study of that. They're generally generalists. They reproduce not according to season. They probably have a lot of offspring, and they probably eat everything or anything. And they can outcompete, and this includes, plants and other, diseases as well. So it's always it's a battle.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about conservation, I mean, you're skeptical about the conservation movements back in the 60s and 70s. What are your thoughts today?
I think it's a disaster. I think we're headed off a cliff, unfortunately. It's terrible. And the virus hasn't helped. Poaching is up. Climate change is a distant fifth in terms of urgency. It's just, I understand. I mean, people are just trying to put food on the table now, and that's really, and I feel the same way. It's terrifying. And that's the last thing that anyone wants to think about. But the implications are dire, and the virus is really, as many people have pointed out, a speeded up version of how we're going to respond to climate change, which is, terrible leadership. Some people sacrifice, others don't. It's this battle of, highly politicized, partisan, tribal stuff that couldn't be more idiotic and self-defeating.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to remind everyone who's watching that if they have questions, they can enter it into the comment section on Facebook.
There's a couple of images though. No, or are you done?
That's all of my questions for now. I wanted to be mindful of time.
Yes, we're at the half-hour mark.
But let me see.
Any questions? So you have to ask. If there are any, maybe they're not. Who wants to ask a question of someone who just said that?
Let's see if there are any questions. Let me double check 1 second.
I can chime in. We have a couple questions.
Oh, goody.
So the first one is someone had a question about dolphins seen in New York Harbor. Is this true? Do you guys know anything about that?
No.
Okay.
Probably.
I know that there's been some in the Gowanus Canal. I've seen articles about that.
Oh, I made a painting of it.
Yeah. This next question is from Beatrice Modisette. It says, can you talk about the balance or relationship between your interest in imagining the past, future, present potential of these places and having a scientific understanding of them? She is interested in the relationship between your more literal understanding of these places and your emotional and experience connections, or emotional and experiential connections with them.
Huh. It's a pretty ambitious, like, how do I reconcile? I mean, I'm just going to turn this into a question that I want to answer. I think it's part of the reason I do my work, and I try to make work about things that are challenging emotionally or difficult, or that I know I'm profoundly upset about them, potentially enraged by the lack of priority for things that I believe are worth caring about. And it's a way of not being destructive or self-destructive. Doing art is better than, it keeps you off the street, so to speak.
And Alexis, we have another question. What was the most surprising animal you learned about that lived in New York?
Well, surprising. I love the idea that there were walruses not too long ago on the south shore of Long Island, Jacob Riis Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that idea of walruses hanging out next to the glacier. And just
Pretty long time ago.
not that long ago. The other was that infuriating mouse that lived in my closet, in my pantry, that has only been vacated by the recent arrival of Millicent the cat. So I made a drawing of the mouse before we got the cat out of the dirt from the backyard.
Oh.
And there's a funny story about that because I was doing the project for Salon 94 during the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to find a way to get the frozen dirt up because it was like frozen solid, right. And I'm hacking away at it. And then I realized that if I poured hot water on it, that would melt part of it enough to get the stuff I needed.
That makes sense. Another question for you. Are you finding yourself more interested in drawings or painting currently?
Well, since we've been hiding out in Connecticut the last 3 months since March 21st. And I made about 20 watercolors for my upcoming show at Guildhall next summer about animals that are vectors for diseases, sort of arriving in cities. For instance, imagine a pangolin clinging to a piece of driftwood arriving into New York Harbor. That's the type of, all these animals that have brought diseases to humans are sort of unwitting and unwilling carriers that bring disease to humans, and they've been brought to humans for basically the food trade or the so-called medicinal trade. And also, that could be wild animals or domestic animals. I just read this morning that there's a wonderful new potential pandemic coming from China from pigs. Yay. I've been working on those watercolors that I'll show, called The Things They Carry, which is a sort of subset of the shipwrecks because it's the idea that they fell off a ship, or I don't know, whatever. I made it work logically. But I am about to start painting next week after I move my painting stuff from my studio in Tribeca up to Connecticut because we bought a house up in Connecticut. So I am getting ready to start painting. So both.
And just back to your the works that are made for Guildhall, did you make those based on the current situation, or
I've been working on the show for 2 years? So there will be about 20 paintings, and they're history paintings through my lens, my particular lens of, the sinking of the Medusa, the famous ship that became Jericho's The Raft of the Medusa, but from a different point of view of the seabirds that were using what was left of the human remains on that raft once the survivors were rescued, or the SS Sultana from the worst maritime disaster in the history of the US, which you probably never heard of, which is a paddle boat on the Mississippi that lost 1,700 people that were being brought back from the South Civil War, prisoner of war, brought north after the war was over, and exploded and killed 1,700 people. So each painting is a relationship to a moment in history that I find fascinating. And I'm working with curators at Peabody Essex also, who hopefully the show will go there, Dan Finnemore and Trevor Smith. Andrea Grover is the director of Guildhall, has been the curator, and many other people have been so helpful in terms of helping me. Chanda Carey as well. So anyway.
Well, looking forward to seeing that show
Me
next
too.
year. And then let's see, another few questions. Have you ever thought of making art from biological virus or as organisms that attack other biology?
Sounds like it's the idea of making drawings out of disease. I think I'll pass on that, but not because I'm a coward. No. I've made drawings out of everything. I don't think it would be that interesting to look at. It's an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. And last couple questions. How do you keep from being overly discouraged about the current administration's policies regarding conservation? Do you see any reasons to be hopeful? And you touched upon this earlier.
I think anger is a good mask for despair. So let's leave it at that. I haven't given up yet, even though a logical person would.
So given that note, I guess we should wrap this up. Is there
Have you ever created a larger, I see another question, hold on.
Yeah, let's see. Here we go, one on a happier note.
All right.
Have you ever created larger works with this process similar to your narrative paintings?
In terms of the field drawings?
Field drawings.
No, I haven't. I would love to. That would be great. I would love to make one 20 feet long.
For your next show,
Yeah,
or your following show.
Yeah.
And sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Nice to
Really
see you.
enjoyed the conversation. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And just want to say next Tuesday, we have Candace Thompson's program, Introduction to Foraging with Solar One at noon. So see you there.
All right. Ciao.
Thanks again, Alexis.
Bye.
Bye.